Welcome to the Popcorn Talk Network, for the online broadcast network that features movie discussion, news, and interviews. Press 1. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies. From the Popcorn Talk Network, the online broadcast network for movie talk, this is Inside the Documentary, featuring breakdowns and interviews about all the latest documentaries.
Hello and welcome to Popcorn Talks Inside the Documentary, where we discuss the trials and tribulations of documentary filmmaking. I'm your host, Kristen Elizabeth Snyder. You can follow me at Cinematic Escape. You can follow the Popcorn Talk Network at Popcorn Talk on Twitter. And my host joining me today.
My name is Isaiah Castañeda. You can follow me on Twitter at Castañeda_Isa.
Hi everybody, welcome to the show. I'm Ryan Malady. You can follow me at Ryan Malady.
And today we're discussing the documentary Winning, the Racing Life of Paul Newman. And we have in studio with us today executive producer Matt D'Andrea and co-director Nate Adams. Thank you guys for being in studio with us.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So this documentary is about, Paul Newman not just being the Oscar-winning actor that everyone knows him by, but rather having a passion for racing, and he wanted to be seen in a different light. He wasn't like the typical Hollywood actor who wanted to live in that light. He was a guy's guy, and he was very passionate about racing, which a lot of people don't know, which I learned through this documentary. How many hours did you guys actually shoot, and how much did you end up using?
We shot, I mean, the ratio, some people say it's 100 hours to an hour that you may use. It's the amount of footage you go through for a documentary is astronomical, because you become like a detective. Some guy has some picture in his garage, and his buddy, my buddy was Paul Newman's mechanic, and then the mechanic knows this guy who shot video of Paul Newman in 1977, and then you have to go track that down and find it and watch it. And I mean, I'll say this: we licensed over 100 different photos and video clips from different people for this documentary. So that will tell you the amount of footage. And then the interviews, each interview, there were about 20 that we shot for this documentary, and each one is between, some of the racers were only 30 minutes, but some of the other people were 3-4 hour interviews. I interviewed Redford for 2.5 hours.
Wow.
So.
Oh, wow.
Because he's very chatty and you can't shut him up.
He was very kind. He was very kind, but I could tell at the end of it, he was like, "Okay, buddy, you've asked me every question.
Yeah, you can go now.
Stop asking me questions."
Yeah, you can go now. But it was a great interview, and everybody was really amazing to not just talk with, but everybody was very giving. When you approach them and say, "Hey, we're doing a documentary about Paul Newman," everybody just jumped at the chance, which is great. I imagine there's plenty of documentaries out there, by the way.
There were a few people who didn't jump at the chance, but well, for the most part,
right? There's one or two, but for the most part,
really did this.
I think that speaks to it speaks about Paul Newman as the man. Like people just loved that guy, loved him at the racetrack, loved working with him, and you'll see that in a bunch of the interviews. People loved talking about him.
Yeah, that's great. You guys it was pretty impressive when I was watching the lineup. You got Jay Leno, Robert Redford, you mentioned Patrick Dempsey, Tom Cruise. Well, I guess he wasn't, you actually didn't get the interview with Tom
We didn't
Cruise.
get the contemporary Tom Cruise.
Yeah, we got archive footage
We
of
got
Tom.
the 1986 Tom Cruise, which is
Some
still
prefer-
interesting to see, because, it's the from, they met on the set of The Color Money, and Paul used to, part of his deal when he went out was that he had to have something at night to drive. Like, if he did a movie for you at night, he got to go drive race cars or some kind of cars. And at that time, he was driving dirt track cars, because he didn't care what kind of stuff he drove. He just liked to drive. So, and he would take Tom out, and they started racing on these dirt tracks. And then he got Tom on his team with Bob Sharp for 2 years, and they raced together.
Wow.
I have that same thing in my contract. It's whatever I'm doing, I just got to go on that. Like somebody's got to have a car for me so I can go out there and drive circles somewhere at the end of the day.
So you've got the need.
Yeah.
The need for speed.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
So Newman,
You owe somebody like $5 for that now.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how they got into that movie, too.
Yeah.
Is that so?
Days of Thunder, yeah.
No, that was Tom. That was.
Oh,
Top
that's
Gun.
right there. Yeah. Sorry, my bad.
Now, how did the relationship actually start with filming this documentary? Obviously, you co-directed it. Carolla directed it. You executive produced it. When did this happen? Like, when did you guys actually sit down? How did the idea come about? And could you give us?
This was Adam's idea.
Okay.
Adam owns the cars. He started. I mean, Matt knows more about when he started getting the cars, but basically, Adam and I were gonna. I produced Adam's movie called Road Hard. Also, as a comedy, but it's a feature film. It's narrative, not a documentary. And we were working on that, but the director, the co-director with that, and Adam, Kevin Hinch, he ended up. We were going to shoot it like a year before we actually shot it, and we didn't have anything to do. And Adam said, I wanted to do this documentary forever. And then he found out my background was making documentaries, and he was like, hey, I want to make this Paul Newman documentary. No one thinks it's a real documentary. The guys at ESPN said it's like maybe a 10-minute thing, not even a 30 for 30.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he has very good friends at ESPN, and he's like, I think it's an amazing documentary. And then he started showing me these old videos that he had, and I was like, this is a great documentary. And I mean, this is 100% Adam Carolla being a car guy and saying this needs to be made and this story needs to be told.
Adam Carolla currently has 7 of Paul Newman's original race cars, and he has a bunch more cars, but there's 7 Newman race cars, and every time you do the research to find a car like that, and then when you buy that car and bring that car in, it comes with so many stories and all kinds of stuff. There's stories just like literally written on the car. There's notes and log books and things like that, and the guys that you buy them from, because these cars, Adam started buying these cars before they were desirable. So we weren't at car auctions and raising a paddle and paying tons of money for these cars. These were race shops and race teams that own these cars in shops and warehouses all around the country. So when they're looking to get rid of a car, they're looking to get rid of the car and all the extra parts and all the memorabilia and everything that goes with it. So those great stories are what sort of fueled Adam's love for this. And you talk to Adam, he, even when making this film, he's like, I had no idea all of this stuff about Paul Newman. I mean, the guy had a 35-year racing career. He's got 4 national championships. He's not screwing around. He was a really good driver, and he became a great driver. And along with that came some amazing stories. Now, the toughest part, I think, that Nate and Adam had was, how do you take 35 years of racing and put it in a 90-minute movie?
Yeah, the biggest note that I get from, like, Michael Andretti walked up to me after we had the premiere in LA, and he said, I did not know all that stuff about Paul. And he won a championship racing for Paul Newman, and Paul and the Andrettis are very close, and he's like, I just didn't know all that stuff, because Paul was not a braggadocious guy, so he didn't talk about the races he won and the things he accomplished. He just liked to race. So,
every single car guy that I know, and I've been doing the car side of the business for a long time, everyone that has seen the film said they walked out of there learning something new about Paul and his racing career, which is great. That's really what you want in a film like this. You want everybody to look at it and go, wow, I had no idea. Like, I'm even more amazed about that guy and his racing career after I seen the movie.
Right.
And they were at 100 of his races.
It was a very compelling racing documentary, and I've always been a Paul Newman film, and I'm a fan of his films, and like Cool Hand Luke, and there's just so many, but I had no idea. And during the film, a part that really struck me is that he was talking about wanting to burn scripts so that he could continue racing instead. And so he started when he was 47 years old. And some people, I remember from the film, saying that he could have been one of the greats, but he still won 108 races and 8 championships. So I want to know how
those were as an owner. He won 4 national championships
as a driver.
As a driver, he still won a lot of races.
It's funny because they say he could have been one of the greats. He is one of the greats. He's a 4-time national champion. I mean, he is one of the greats.
He wasn't winning, the Indy 500, but he was an extraordinarily good driver. I mean, he raced against some of the very best drivers out there in the Trans Am series.
So how did your vision change from beginning filming the documentary towards then after you completed all the filming?
Yeah, well, it started with not just the cars and the stories that came with it, but then there's a book called Winning, written by Matt Stone. And Adam had that book for quite some time. And then finally, when he got around to sort of flipping through it, he's like, this could be a really good film. And then from there, Nate and the guys had licensed that book. I think that just provided somewhat of an outline, a little bit of a guide for what the film could be, but the film ended up being nothing really like the book. It took on its own life.
It's like anything else. Yeah, once you start delving into all those hours of footage and all the people, you find out there's so much more depth to all the people and the stories, when the Mario Andretti section in the book is like a half a paragraph, and then you talk to Mario Andretti for 20 minutes and you got a lot of stuff that you want to put in this documentary because it's amazing, what you find out. And I mean, if you want to feel terrible about your own life and your own accomplishments, you just take a look at what Paul Newman did, and then go back and look at your life and go, oh yeah, I didn't do much.
Do you guys feel like maybe you left a few things out because we know that Adam Carolla, he's a race car driver himself. I think he's won twice for the Toyota.
Adam raced in the Toyota Pro Celebrity Race of Long Beach, and he raced several times as a celebrity.
And won twice.
And he won as a celebrity, and when you win, you come back automatically the next season as a pro. And he was the first to win as a celebrity and then come back and win as a pro as well.
Wow.
Were any of the things left out because of maybe his experience with racing?
I don't know that there was anything left out because of Adam's experience. I think there were some things left out because there's 35 years and you've got 90 minutes.
There's definitely. I mean, there's one big section, and Matt can talk to this too, that will be in the extras on the DVD. That's super cool for car people, because also for sure we'll have all the, even on iTunes, we have the long, like if you want to watch the whole 20-minute interview with Mario Andretti, it's in the extras on iTunes.
Wow, that's awesome.
And the same with Patrick Dempsey and Jay Leno and Graham Rahal and I think Sebastian Bourdais, but we're going to put all those in the DVD extras. But the other DVD extra that's not available on iTunes is Adam restored one of Paul's cars and raced it. And we go through that whole process of what it's like to restore a car. And I mean, Matt can talk to that more.
These guys spent about a year documenting that process as well. It's a pretty intense process of what it takes to get a car, because when you get a car, you don't know really what condition it's going to be in. In this particular case, everything down to the bare tube frame chassis of this race car was damaged or rusted and had to be either cut out and replaced and built. We had to basically build a car from scratch all the way up and just use as many authentic parts as possible. And when you see that bit of it, which will maybe be like a DVD extra or something,
will be for sure.
That's pretty interesting. As well. That'll appeal more to the actual car guys, but
I'm
the film
interested.
itself.
It's not like restoring a Mustang or a Camaro or a muscle car or something, because these cars are, and also we have video where you see how many times they crash these cars and stuff, and it's just very interesting the way they're made, because they're all one of a kind. So if something breaks, like in this car, the piece of the turbo had broken, but they don't have another. They have to remanufacture the part. Yeah. Because they don't have another engine to just go to Pep Boys and buy a part for it.
And the cars that you buy that are complete, you really don't know what you're getting, right? So it's funny, because the first time we sat down and we started going through a lot of the footage of the film, I saw one of the cars go into a wall barrier, and I was like, I knew the car was damaged at one point, but in the shot, the car hits the barrier, and then somebody hits him from behind. And I'm thinking, oh man, I didn't even think about that. So I went back into the warehouse to look at the car from behind to see if it was repaired the way it was supposed to. Because I'm like, maybe the car doesn't drive straight. Now we know why. It was sandwiched between a wall and another car. So there's some pieces in the film that I saw for the first time, and I went back and looked at the actual cars.
And the damage is there.
Yeah, it was fixed. We just got to make sure it's fixed the proper way.
So I know it took you guys 2 years to make the documentary. The part where you restored the car, is that a year in that 2 years, or was that separate?
Yeah,
you were also doing that at the same time.
That was another project stacked on during the whole process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And was that mostly because you guys wanted to include that as part of the documentary or the DVD?
It's because Nate's in house and Adam doesn't want anybody sitting around doing nothing. He's like, Nate, go film the car and the documentary and do a feeture film road hard and
you're
do
not,
this. Yeah.
Adam's not big on watching paint dry or anything like that. Yeah. So if there's something to be filmed, he wants you to go film it. Or but it was cool, and it really is. I mean, I'm not a car guy like Matt, so I'm a story guy. But the process is very cool. I mean, I think it's like 12, maybe 13 minutes, this little piece, but it's very cool. I mean, I mean, even people I've showed it to that aren't car people, they're like, that is super fascinating. No idea.
Which is good, because the whole idea of the film was to make a documentary about Paul Newman's racing career, but make it interesting enough that you don't have to be in love with cars to love the film. There's such a great story about Paul Newman, and the people that he interacted with, and Joanne, and how, you know, racing changed their whole life. She had to make a schedule about where are we going to go. Are we going to go to Lime Rock? Are we going to go to Connecticut? Are we going to, you know, are we going to go race there? And that was their, you know, that was their togetherness. You know, that was their trips and stuff. So it's a great story even outside of the racing, I think.
Absolutely. I remember I only really knew Paul Newman from his acting career, and I even told my little brother when I was going to see the documentary, hey, I'm gonna go see the Paul Newman documentary. He's like, oh, that's the guy on the ranch.
Yeah, that's what all kids say. It's the guy on the salad dressing.
The salad dressing guy, right?
Yeah.
But then if you tell your mom, they like melt. Oh, Paul Newman.
Yeah.
Even my wife is like, Paul Newman.
It's funny because there's different age
Yeah,
groups. Like, I talked to my mom and she says, she references one movie, and then somebody else references like the Hudsucker Proxy, you know, like a little bit older Paul Newman. And then somebody references, you know, Cars, the movie, as The Voice, you know, and
Which
that.
I haven't even seen, and I was
How can you have not seen Cars?
Sorry, well, I'm going to now.
You have
true.
to now,
Yeah,
right?
because I had
You know,
no
there's
idea.
two of them, so you're really behind.
Right.
Was
They're
he, did he
making
do
the third
voice
one now.
for both of them?
No, his
just the
character
first
wasn't
one.
in the second one.
That was his last feature film.
That's correct.
Yes.
right.
Cars,
Which is
Pixar was his last feature.
which is just icing on the cake for him, because, you know, you see in the film he talks about looking for, you know, probably decades for the great car film, and the last film he ever did is considered one of the greatest car films of all time. Cars as an animation is considered one of the greatest car films of all time.
Is it one of you guys' favorites?
How can you not love it? First of all, it's Pixar and it's great. And
Yeah, of course.
Just
I mean,
checking.
it's like that and Le Mans are such different kind of movies.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's you know, you gotta love it.
Nate's got a little kid at home, so he probably has to see that movie. Like,
He's
on all
he's
day.
not old enough yet.
just wait,
Okay.
and then it's gonna be on like all the
Replay.
time.
I've watched all my friends go through the Lightning McQueen phase where it's a disaster.
There you go.
Yeah, it's just
That's
never
great.
ending.
So knowing him as an actor, I mean, my generation, most people know of Paul Newman as the filmmaker, or the film star.
Yeah,
And I think
he was-
your documentary does a great job of taking his life out of the acting world and into the racing world, but you do transition it rather well. He ends up mentioning how the racing is like a theater. It has its audience,
Yep.
its cast, drama, comedy, tragedy, and we saw all of that in the film. But he goes on to say that he preferred racing without spectators.
Yeah.
And that made me feel kind of bad watching it.
But that's a testament to how much he just loved it. That's the same thing that I said where when he did a movie, he just went to a track at night and got a car. He didn't care. He didn't want anyone watching. He just
Right.
wanted to race.
It's amazing how in his day the biggest star on the planet was one of the most shy guys, right? Like he just wanted to get in the car and drive, and you'll see a lot of times in the movie, a lot of guys call him PL or PLN or PL Newman. He never put Paul Newman on the car. He always put PL or PLN on the car, and everybody on the racing circuit knew him as PL. He was just under the radar the whole
and
time.
He didn't
You know,
like
of
to
course
do
he
the
would
press.
win.
He didn't. He just wanted to go there and race, and he really the guys that we talked to who were like, because back then racing was a little different in the sense that the kind of sports car that he did sports car racing with the SCCA, and there were a lot of guys like there's a guy who comes by our shop sometimes named Casey Mollett who raced against Newman, but he drove his own car to the track. He was his own mechanic, and he fixed the car and brought it there. And he's like, hey, it cost me $50 a weekend to race. But Newman loved those kind of guys because they were just your regular blue-collar, work-a-day guy. And he was great friends with Casey because Casey was like, no, he just loved to hang out with us and have a beer. You know?
And he had a massive competitive spirit,
Yes.
it seems. And that's one of the things that kind of brought him out of the acting world and into the racing world is you can't really compete as an actor against another person in another role.
It's so
but
true.
You found a lot of solace in this world. Can you identify with any of those passions that Paul Newman had? Did you discover anything about him in yourself?
Well, for me, I
No.
I come from a background of I wrestled competitively for 20 years.
That's
so
right.
it's
You got
very
three
it's
state championships?
Yeah, 3-time state champion. Yeah.
Right on.
The research guy.
All right. But it's definitive. Like, well, you go out there, you win, you lose. There's no nobody else. And I mean for a time I was an actor, so I do understand where acting is very subjective. You may have the bad look or a good look or whatever someone's looking for. you may be sleeping with the director. There's 50,000 reasons why you could get a part. When you go out in a someplace like racing, and Paul Newman said it comes down to 1,000th of a second, and it really does.
Yeah.
It's like either you win or you lose, and you compete against yourself in your own time, and that's it, man. You go out and you do it.
Now, Paul really had an issue with giving interviews. How difficult was it for you guys to actually get any interviews? And we actually saw this in the film, where he was being interviewed by some French guy. And
That was at Le Mans.
Yeah.
While he's racing, in the middle of the race.
The
That guy was
24-hour
insane.
race.
But
Yeah.
even before that, we didn't really see
He
much
didn't.
of that.
He didn't like to do interviews, and he didn't like to sign autographs. He was very famous for not signing autographs.
I like what Adam Carolla said during the Q&A that we went to the other night, that, if Twitter was popular then, he can't see him as someone who would be tweeting
Right.
his successes and championship
Yeah,
wins.
I don't think so.
No,
I don't think he would.
absolutely not.
Jay Leno said that too in the doc. He said,
Yeah.
Newman's not. He's not that kind of guy, because he's a 50s, quiet, work hard. Study, be a student of the game. Don't brag about yourself. Just do your work and do the best you can. And it's not what sort of the world is like now.
Right.
Now everybody's like, hey, look at me.
We found out a lot about him like that. Like, even we didn't know this. We found out in your film that the Newmans Own salad dressing. He had a passion for making salad dressing, and as soon as they decided to put his face on the bottle, that was the day he decided that he wouldn't take a single cent from the
Boy, was that a
profits.
bad move. $430 million later, you're like, I could have taken 10%. 10%.
But all that goes to all of that $430 million went to charity.
It all goes to charity. It's a massive organization now.
That's why I say, look at what look at your own life, and then look at this guy's life. There you go.
Yeah, he's left quite
Thanks,
a
Nate.
legacy.
Thanks.
I would tell people, that guy, the most interesting man in the world. Paul Newman is literally the most interesting man in the world. Everything he did was not just successful, but ragingly successful.
Right, and it's amazing how you barely skim the surface of all these other successes, because it was just focused on the racing life.
I mean, his racing life was worthy of a documentary. We didn't talk about the guy who's literally one of the greatest actors in American cinema and one of the biggest philanthropists in the United States.
Right. Yeah, you pretty much start the documentary when he hits 47, 48 years old.
Yeah, he's already a superstar. He's already done Cool Hand Luke, The Hustler.
Butch Cassidy.
He's a megastar. Well, he did Winning, and then he did Butch Cassidy, and I mean, I love that little story about it used to be called The Sundance Kid and Butch Cassidy, not that the title was different.
That's amazing.
Right.
You were talking about his making the own salad dressing and stuff. So Paul Newman's the kind of guy that would just take ownership in anything that he was tackling. And a story that wasn't actually in the film, but some friends of mine later in Paul Newman's racing career, they did historic races for him. So they did 24 Hours of Daytona and stuff. And even then, after the salad dressing, Paul Newman was going to them and going, guys, come over to my trailer. I want you to try these 4 popcorns. Because Newman's Own has a popcorn.
Yeah.
And he was at the trailer. Like, he was sitting in the backseat of a car while 2 of the other guys were driving, a friend of ours, John Hotchkiss, being one of them. And John was driving a car going to the track, and Newman's in the back going, guys, try this popcorn. And then he had like another bag. He's like, try this popcorn. He seasoned them all differently. So even Newman's Own popcorn was him making it at the time, deciding what it was going to be. He would just have to take ownership of anything that he was doing, and that's probably what made it great, right?
Absolutely. That's really cool. I also liked in the documentary how Newman talked about, as an actor, you got to assume a lot of different personalities. And so when he started racing, he felt like he was assuming the part of a race car driver, which I thought was really cool coming from him.
He's living out the role of a driver.
I feel like he found home in the racetrack, right? And he finally found that role that really fit him, because it's like, actors all the time are playing different personalities, and you don't know if they're losing themselves or finding themselves, and I feel like he finally found himself in that role.
Yeah, that's a great line from the film, and a great line from Paul Newman. And in the film, Bob Sharp also talked about that. He was saying that his concentration from the movie world played a big part as his in the racing world. His concentration, the way he was able to focus and become a race car driver. But yeah, as you can see in the beginning, just like in his acting career, he wasn't good in the beginning, and he had to do it again and again and again. He didn't just go out there and kill it. It took him 10 years. Like he applied himself as a student of racing for 10 years before people legitimately said, hey, you're good.
Wow.
One of the great things I find out about the film is that he started with small cars.
Yep.
he didn't go big and buy the
it's
fastest
genius, by the way.
No, and he could have raced any car. He's Paul Newman. He could have raced. He could have went and got Ferraris. He could have could have got any kind of car he wanted to race and raced it. Right. Porsches.
And those cars weren't given to him, by the way. He still went out with Bob Sharp and his team guys and raised the money and pitched the sponsors and said, "This is why I should be doing this." And then I'm sure Paul Newman or his agents or somebody else had to go back to Hollywood and fight the fact that like, well, it's Paul Newman, he wants to race. They're saying, no, he's too valuable to us. And he's saying, I don't care. I want to do it anyway. So, I mean, if Paul Newman tried to do that today, I can't imagine what the insurance would cost.
Right.
Yeah, it would, from my standpoint as a producer, it would be very, if your lead actor was racing in a race where he could die at any time, that's a very serious.
And your lead actor is 75 years old at the time and going to go race against a bunch of 25-year-olds.
Well, he raced until he was 83 years old.
Yeah. 82, he won his last race. Well, he won his last race at 82.
Yeah.
But he did race.
He drove a little at 83.
Yeah.
I mean, he acted and raced until he died.
Yeah.
There was no stop period, really.
Well, you said, it was another quote from your film, I guess, from Paul Newman. I'll retire when I get slower, not older.
Yeah, that's a great mantra for any race car driver, by the way.
It's
everyone's the same age behind the wheel.
That's
right?
It's really about your reflexes and your one of the things that he really had in your ability to concentrate.
And you'll see early in the film, one of his instructors when he did the movie Winning in 1969, I believe, was Bob Bondurant. And Bob Bondurant, how old's Bob today?
Yeah, Bob took me for a hot lap.
That's what I was going to say.
Bob Bondurant won Le Mans. He's
Bob's
like 82. Yeah,
and he just drove with Bob.
I just went out there and he took me for a lap around in a GT40 from the 60s. A replica with the original motor in it, and it's honestly scared the life out of me. I had a puddle about an inch deep of sweat in my shoes.
Are you scared?
And this guy.
Are you scared because he's 82?
Well,
you think he's not going to be able to do it?
Yeah,
because he can do it.
Because honestly, and I've heard this about several other very famous drivers. He can, he's real slow, and when you talk to him, he's, he doesn't talk real quick or anything. So I thought, he's just going to, putt me around this thing. And he took off like we were on fire. And we were going, this is a small, very tight track, and we're getting up to like 140, 150.
Oh my God.
And he's driving like, we need to win the race. And I'm like, you got to.
Yeah.
He did like 5 laps with me, and he's like, you want to go again? And I was like, no, absolutely not. Get me out of this car.
I would have been in tears for sure.
See, I think it would have been the most
there
fun
was too
thing
many
ever.
people watching for me to do that.
They said, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry for everybody.
You guys ever drive around in one of Paul Newman's Datsuns? Have you ever fixed them
I'm
up?
sure Matt has.
I've never been on the track with those cars because usually when you go to these vintage races that Adam goes into, it's a big ordeal. It's expensive to race. I've driven a few around, like I moved them from one shop to the other and things like that. But haven't
there a feeling you
puddle
get?
making. No puddle making.
No, and it's a cool feeling. Like when you get into any one of those types of race cars you've done, and I've done a handful of race cars and street cars on the track, and again, you get into any race car and it's a completely different feeling. It really is a completely different feeling.
I want to talk about one of my favorite parts of the documentary was Paul Newman, the prankster.
Yeah, right?
Listen, you talk about what we cut out. That section
way.
could have been about 45 minutes.
Oh, wow. Well,
Those are epic pranks. There's here's a $40,000 prank. It's like
the one with him in Redford where they crushed up the Porsche and passed it back. I literally, Adam looks at me and goes, "Those are rich guy jokes."
Those are rich guy jokes.
If you're crushing up a Porsche and passing it back and forth, and then having someone make a sculpture out of it.
Right, could you guys find that? I really wanted to see it. Really.
I asked Robert Redford if he had a picture, and he said he did, and I just could never get it. I just tried so hard. I really wanted that picture.
Yeah, I don't know what year that was, but it wasn't like he was whipping out an iPhone snapping photos. So it's just different then.
This
it was
is
so hard to find that kind of
in the 80s
stuff.
when they did that.
Wow. Well, if you find it, that is Twitter gold.
That is Twitter gold. Can you think of any other prank that's not in the film?
Oh, sure. There's a great
Can you give us one?
Sure. There was another guy, when Paul won his first championship, it was in a car that he bought from a guy named Bob Tullius, and they raced against his team, and they had a big thing going. And Paul, so they got this garbage truck and painted it up like it was Paul's race truck, and then they took it to the, Paul painted it up like it was Bob Tullius's truck, like his team, and they rotted it around the track, and it's a garbage truck painted in their colors and stuff.
That's awesome.
So Bob Tullius got it. a bus full of elderly women and men and sent them they got them all shirts that said Paul Newman Fan Club and sent them all down to the paddock where all the racers are to Paul Newman. So they got a busload
just because he's making fun of Paul being the oldest guy at the track.
So a busload of old people showed up thinking that, hey, we get to go meet Paul Newman and we're the Paul Newman Fan Club. So but I guess he was very nice to them and he went through it all. But
the first time he ever signed autographs.
These are all epic jokes. It's like it's not like you went on a Craigslist and be like, hey, who's over the age of 70 and loves Paul Newman? Like I got a great gig for you.
There were like the Andretti's and Paul. They would take their rental cars, I guess, because they could get on any track they wanted, and they would be at the track, and they would just start like going off in the rental car, like 2 rental cars on the track, and they would wreck them, I guess. I mean, they would hit the wall, like they were telling us a story of Paul taking one into the wall or whatever.
And there's a scene like that in Days of Thunder with Tom Cruise, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if Tom had that conversation with Paul Newman while he was racing, and then somehow Tom got that into the film, because that's a funny part of the film Days of Thunder, and knowing that it's a true story makes it even better.
He was also like, he would take his guys out, and when he owned, he didn't race quite as much when he had Newman Haas Racing, which was his open wheel team. But he would take all the drivers and make them race against him in go-karts. They would go to go-kart tracks, and then he would take them out and make them race against him. And one of my favorite stories is a guy raced for him named Sebastian Bourdais, and he was a 4-time IndyCar champion. 4 years in a row, he was the world champion, which is amazing. I think he's the only guy still to do that. But they did the Baja 1000, which is an off-road race in like those dune buggies, and you have 2 guys in the car, and it was Sebastian and Paul. And it's, I don't know how, is that like a 20, how, it's a long race.
It's a long race, and you don't really stop. So basically, like, you
just
eat,
switch
sleep,
drivers.
well, not sleep, but you eat, you pee, whatever, and, you just, it's it while you're driving.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
There's like,
So,
not to get graphic, basically, you just tape a bottle to yourself.
Wow.
So Sebastian was telling us about this, and Paul was like 80 when they did
Paul
this.
was driving, and Sebastian was like a navigator.
Both. No, they switched.
Okay.
So, but Sebastian said
And
that
traded bottles.
there were so many times.
Same bottle.
They passed
Same
the bottle. back and forth. They just had one bottle.
Okay.
Two tubes, one
Two
bottle.
lines to it.
That makes more sense.
But Sebastian said that he was constantly grabbing Paul's knee because he was going too fast, and he was scared that he was going to die.
Oh, wow.
And
Four-time
or holding
champion.
onto the bottle.
during the race. I mean, to think that this is a guy who
4-time
goes-
Indy champion
he
was
goes
scared for his
200
life.
miles an hour like it's nothing.
In an
Like, that's
open wheel car, which is way more dangerous than anything.
That's no big deal to him. And he's doing an off-road race scared to death because Paul Newman was going too fast.
I would have loved to have done that.
Yeah. I mean,
How did you guys decide, like, what of these stories to keep in the documentary, what to put on the extras? Did you do the focus groups? How did you decide? Because the lady story with the bus, like, that sounds like gold to me. I need to see that.
I think that ultimately comes down to Nate and Adam. These guys are the storytellers, and like we said, the hardest part of creating a film like that is how do you take 35 years and wrap it up in 90 minutes? That's where these guys came in. All I do is bring in the car side of the stories, but these guys need to tell an actual good. A good, they need to make a good film, need to tell a good story about it, and that's Nate's background.
yeah, you just, it's, you just gotta, it's, as they say in filmmaking, sometimes you just have to kill your babies, and like you love,
Who says that? That's horrible.
That's what they say.
Like
Well, it's
hamsters.
because you love things, and you don't want to cut them. Believe me, there's one line that I still to this day, like, I just wish that I was in there so badly.
Can you give it to us?
Do you guys remember the guy Willie T. Ribbs?
Yeah, I was just about to ask you about
Okay.
that.
Willie T. Ribbs was one of the first black drivers to race, and he's another person that we really want to do a documentary on. He was the first black driver to race in the Indy 500, and he got his first basically long-term professional gig because Paul Newman basically put his thumb down on a team and said, "You got to hire this guy," because he knew what a good driver he was, because no one else would hire him. So Willie is very outspoken, and he has some great lines in the documentary. Everybody's favorite line, which is Paul Newman was on Viagra before there was Viagra, and then he says he was a hard
dick brother.
Yeah, he was a hard dick brother. And that's something that only Willie T. Ribbs could say. It doesn't sound very good coming from me.
No.
But
It would have been funny if Robert Redford said that, but it was better from Willie T.
Willie T had a line where he said Paul Newman was that basically, like, when Paul Newman walked on the track, he walked like a pimp. And he just had this cool strut, and that's how he always walked, and he never changed whether he won, lost, or nothing else. And he said, Cool Hand Luke. He said that really was Paul Newman.
Wow.
And I was like, and we were gonna put that line back in, and it still like haunts me to this day that I would have loved to put it back in.
Well, maybe it'll end up on one of our extras, right?
I
could put it in the extras.
Yeah, it should probably be in the extra.
I mean, you know, the Willie T is. I just talked to him on the phone last week. I love that guy. He seems
like
so
a fascinating guy, right? Even just a little bit in the film.
His documentary will be very controversial. There is a lot of controversy in that gentleman's life.
One of my favorite bits from the documentary is the photo when Paul Newman says, "I'm Willie's dad."
Oh yeah, that's part of the sense of humor. Where like he like Willie. The photo, I'll describe it to you. But basically, someone's interviewing Paul Newman at a track, and you see Willie T. Ribbs standing off to the side of Paul Newman.
He's kind of looking at him like,
and he's looking at him very shocked. Like, what are you saying? And Paul Newman wrote, which Paul Newman never signs documentaries, but he wrote on there, "Actually, I'm Willie's dad." And he signed it and sent it to Willie. And it's really,
so
just
funny.
a testament to his sense of humor.
You know what? And even without, I know you wanted to put that line in there about how, Cool Hand Luke Paul Newman really was, but I feel like, just, peace of mind, I did get the impression watching the documentary of that side of his personality. Actually, we got a lot of different levels of the onion, I guess, that is Paul Newman. You guys did a great job with it. You got the humor, you got the everyman, the Cool Hand Luke side of things. And I think it really comes out through you guys' passion. I mean, Adam's comedian, so we got the humor in there. It's beautiful filmmaking, awesome history with cars and racing. I know, like, the Le Mans race. Did I say that right? Yep. So I have learned a little bit.
Yeah.
But I absolutely loved it. I just wanted to give our listeners just a little taste of what kind of Q&A you would be in for if you went and Adam Carolla was in the room asking about the film.
I was in the West Hills catching a contractor at 8 this morning. Very long day, so I'm having a beer.
What's the attractions of Paul Newman for you? I mean, why not do a documentary on Steve McQueen or James Garner?
I don't have any of those shit.
What was the biggest surprise that you learned about Paul Newman in his career?
Gay. Yeah.
Have you always had a passion for restoring and racing cars, or is it something that kind of developed later in your life as it did with Paul?
Well, I always was a kind of a gearhead, but I didn't have any money. My dad didn't have any money, and no one had any tools, so it was like I was a drummer without a drum kit for a long time, and then I had to drive pickup trucks because I was a builder, and so I was into it, but I just couldn't indulge my passion for it because I just physically didn't have any money, and I had to drive a pickup truck for my profession. So, but then later on, it started all kind of seep out of me. But so it was always there. Just you live in an apartment, you don't have a garage, you're parking on the street, you don't have any money, you need a truck to do your job. What are you gonna do?
All right, so there you go. You get a little bit, a kind of a taste of, the men behind the screen, behind the camera. You got the funny, the comic side.
Yeah, Adam wasn't helpful at all, by the way. He was just joking around. He wasn't answering questions. Yeah, he was just cracking wise.
You get a little taste of the passion and where it was rooted, and I was just so happy to be there and to be in your garage. I thought that was so cool.
Well, thanks for coming by.
Yeah, the film as a whole is incredible. Even if you don't know anything about Paul Newman, I mean, you're going to, but even if you're just a racing fan, it's so compelling. I think one guy said at the Q&A that, you could have stuck any racer guy in there and just, like, getting to know the life and living on the edge. That's how, the racers do it. You have to be on the edge the whole time and risking it and not leaving it to the car and just getting in, and the fact that Newman wanted to challenge himself as a man. You know, there was just so much to learn about racers in general, and Paul.
Yeah, look, there's no denying Paul was a badass.
Yeah.
Right? Like, in everything he did, he was a badass. Walking around on the track, in the car, in his acting career, like, everything he touched was a badass. He was a badass.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and you're absolutely right. Like, going into it, like I said, didn't know anything about, really not that much about racing at all in general. A little bit about cars and a little bit about Paul Newman, but definitely not the racing life. So, but even if you don't know anything about his films, or anything about racing or cars in general, you can go into this clean slate and walk out feeling like you know the guy and you know a little bit about racing history, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, one of my favorite interviews, we interviewed his brother, who's a year older than Paul, and he's such a sweet man. But, you know, the best review that I personally got from this film is we screened it for him and his wife, and he said, "You really got my brother," and that was his. To me, that meant job done well.
Wow. Yeah.
You know.
Boy, Arthur Newman, by the way, what a fascinating guy.
Yeah.
Just to be able to sit down and have a conversation with him. That dude's awesome. I want to be that dude when I'm 92. I'm never going to make 92.
He production managed a lot of Paul's movies, Cool Hand Luke, Winning. I mean, he really, you know, and still just not a Hollywood guy, just the sweetest guy.
I loved his line at the end, which I'm sure you know by heart. The part where he says to Paul
that he was luckier than Paul because he got to have Paul for a brother.
Exactly.
That was,
I didn't want to mess it up because the line was so meaningful.
I wouldn't
to
say
me.
that about my brothers.
Well, hopefully they're not watching.
The end of I mean, this is a little sappy, but the end of the documentary, like I can't even explain how many thousands of times I've watched this documentary. But it still, like, you know, gets me a little teared up at the end because I feel so sad.
Same here. And I'm sure most people would say the same. For those who haven't seen it, where can they find it?
You can find this on May 22nd. It will be everywhere on all VOD platforms. You can order it on, DirecTV, Time Warner Cable, Amazon,
Xbox, iTunes.
Xbox. If you want it right now, you can go to iTunes and get it right now. And I would recommend getting it with the extras, which will give you those longer interviews with Mario Andretti and Patrick Dempsey and Jay Leno and those people where, you can listen to the 20, 30-minute interviews, especially if you're a car person.
Absolutely.
You were also mentioning that you were going to be screening the film.
Yes, we will be doing a charity screening in Indianapolis at the Indianapolis 500 next weekend, May 22nd.
Cool.
At the IMAX Theater in Indianapolis. There'll be a lot of drivers there. Adam will be interviewing some of them about Paul Newman before the race. It's for charity. It's for Racing for Cancer and the Indy Family Foundation. And we've had, it's a great, we had a big premiere
There's going to be a party? There's going to
be a huge party beforehand. You can get tickets on a site called Eventbrite. Just type in "Winning the Racing Life of Paul Newman" if you happen to be in Indianapolis or at the Indy 500.
You can go to our website, newmanracingfilm.com. And there should be links there, and you can find out where you buy the film and rent the film and see the film.
And adamcarolla.com for the event. And we had a big screening here at the El Capitan Theater with, Arthur Newman and Patrick Dempsey. A lot of drivers came from the Long Beach Grand Prix, and we had some, super amazing sponsors that came out and really, TrueCar, Nissan.
That was
Spider.
a charity fundraiser event as well, by the way.
Party. Charity.
I think
very
we should
appropriate
fly
to the
there,
spirit
guys.
of the film.
That's kind of what we
you guys
thought
need to
is
get the AfterBuzz TV plane and fly out to Indy this weekend.
Right.
Well, for our fellow documentarians out there watching, were there any setbacks or any advice that you could give to them?
Raise more money.
Listen, this, I think we've already said it, but that, from a filmmaking perspective, this was a big leap of faith for Adam. I mean, Adam funded this documentary himself because he really believed in the story. From a documentary perspective, I've been doing this for a long time, and when you make a documentary, it's not like a feature film. When you make a feature film, there's probably 75 to 100 people that work on it, and the documentary is, creatively, it's me, Adam, and an editor.
Right.
We pretty much did this whole movie. So, it's a very tight sort of group. We would show cuts to Matt and stuff, but as far as like the actual making of this, it's very, you just don't have very much money because it's a documentary, and you really have to be passionate about what you're doing. You really have to like your subject matter. and you not to get too technical, but you do have to impose self deadlines on things, and you know that's always important.
Now, after, and I know we're almost out of time, but after what cut were you ever at a point where you were like, okay, this is too much, we took on more than we could handle, are we ever going to finish this? Because
I said that a lot.
I don't think it's done yet, because I asked Nate. I was going to an event. I was like, Nate, I need to screen the film for somebody. He's like, I'm still working on something. I was like, aren't people out there watching it already? He's like, yeah, I'm still color correcting or something.
Yeah, I'm going to watch a new cut of this tomorrow.
Oh, no.
So, and also for those of you who've never made a film with Adam Carolla, he has something he calls hypervigilance, which is a really intense focus on detail. So he, with the feature or the documentary, he'll just come in on Monday and be like, hey, so I watched the documentary this weekend, and for me that means, hey, we're going to open the documentary up again and change something.
Someday he's going to come in like, it's all good. We're done.
I've never.
We're done. No, it's never going to be that way.
Yeah.
I've been working with him for 6 years on our show, and it's never been.
No.
It's never been. Hey, everything went well today. Let's go home.
Yeah. Although the person that's holding it up now is me, because technically there are a few things that needed to be adjusted, and I am adjusting them. So the person now is technical is different than making a cut or cutting a line.
So at what point do we expect you to shoot your baby?
Well, that's been done, man. That was the Cool Hand Luke line.
You had to adopt a couple of extra kids and kill them as well.
I mean, that's gonna happen.
No babies were harmed in the making.
We're doing a new documentary now, so that's gonna happen. That's gonna be happening soon.
Well, I really enjoyed the cut I saw. I didn't see any coloring issues, and if you guys,
nobody will. Only Nate. Only Nate.
I think it's a done deal.
Me and a bunch of nerdy cinematographers and editors will notice the issues I have.
Well, I'm just so glad that we had a chance to see the documentary, and thank you for inviting us. And those of you at home, don't forget, you can download it right now on iTunes. You can watch it on demand next Friday, May 22nd. You can get your tickets to Indianapolis and go to the party.
I would highly recommend it. I will be there. Adam Carolla will be there.
Yeah, we're going to ride there in a Newman car, right?
You should definitely do that. Yeah, you should do that. Guys, thank you so much for having us here. This has been fun.
Thank you. And where can the fans keep up with you guys and follow you?
I am at Nate Adams 26 on Twitter.
I am on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Motorator. It's Motor, and it's ATOR. And I do a show with Adam Carolla. I do a podcast called CarCast.
I have seen it quite a few times.
So if you guys are car guys,
very
you can
cool
check
show.
us out at CarCastShow.com.
Or Car Girl.
Car Girl.
I think
car
I'm on
guys, car animals.
I think I'm on Twitter too at Nate Adams 26, but I'm not the greatest social media person.
I think we have it in the lower third, so you guys can find me. And where can we find you guys?
You can find me at Castañeda Isa at _ I'm sorry.
You got the accent wrong on his name.
I mean, you're never going to get the spelling right, so just go ahead, Ryan.
Just look right here, guys. It's right here.
Yeah,
I'm for those listening, I'm Ryan Malady, and you can keep up with me on all your favorite social media outlets at Ryan Malady.
Thank you guys again for joining. I'm at Cinematic Escape on Twitter. You can follow Popcorn Talk Network at the Popcorn Talk on Twitter. You can catch us on iTunes and YouTube. Please rate, download, and subscribe, and join us next week where we'll be covering the HBO documentary about Scientology called Going Clear. Thanks for joining us. See you next week.
Cheers.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network. The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Popcorn Talk Network or its owners or principals.